Good morning, happy viewers. Welcome to episode 7 of Lorenzo's space program, Planting Flags. In the last episode, we finished off the Kerbin system, planting flags on Minmus, the moon, and of course Kerbin itself in the first botched up mission. Been thinking long and hard, and for our next conquest, we are going to Duna. And you can see it is quite a bit farther out than the moon or Minmus, which are, after all, just a stone's throw away from Kerbin. We are going interplanetary. And to this end, I have created something. Let's have a look at this rocket. The top bit is the most interesting. We have the command pod here with a parachute. This you might think might be for return to Kerbin. If it does return, we can use it, but what we have not told the crew is that it can also be used to crash this whole thing into Duna, whereas the pod will float down to the surface so that they can plant their flag. That's paramount in this mission. Furthermore, the ship is carrying 2 separate landers. There's 3 Kerbins in this thing and none in these, so this seats 2, leaving 1 for this one. These 2 landers can either land on Duna itself or on the moon Ike. So if all goes well with this one mission, we will be able to accomplish the entire Duna system. Opposite the next to the tiny landers are just 2 cans of spare fuel. They're mounted on decouplers and they have tiny little solid boosters to jettison them away when they're empty. The interplanetary stage here is 2 big fuel tanks, 4 small fuel tanks, and 4 brand new nuclear rocket engines. I'll be explaining how they work later when we're in space. Underneath that is the big beefy launch stage. This is meant to put this bit into orbit so it can go off on to its interplanetary journey. Of course, in true planting flags Kerbal Space Program fashion, none of this has been tested even once. So we're going to be launching. These outer stages are fueling the inner stages. There are solid boosters attached to them, and everything is held together by duct tape or struts. So fingers crossed, we are going to be launching. Our crew today is Franklin, Jonzer, and Durfrod. It's doing a little dance for me, that's great. I hope it will be as happy after the launch. Chances are everything will go horribly wrong, but we will be finding out shortly. I'm going to launch in 3, 2, 1, now. First things first, the launch clamps have not been released. So, we have the option now of releasing them, letting the spacecraft go. Things are overheating, getting the engines. One more thing is overheating. Now it's just the boosters. This booster is exploding. This is not looking well for this rocket at all. I don't think it will be smart to release the clamp. What has exploded? Can we see it? The thing is, solid boosters cannot be throttled down. So the rocket is being held at the ground until these boosters have run out. I have cut throttle, but one of my liquid boosters is still firing. This is probably due to some breakage in the rocket, so that they cannot be controlled. That means they cannot be controlled anymore. So this thing has to burn out before things can be considered safe. Yes, I cannot control this anymore, so I'm thinking it has broken here. We're going to assume the breakage happened because the clamps were still on. We're going to reset this flight and try this again, and this time with the clamps releasing. And hopefully the motion through the air, the cooling that generates, and the not being held down by the clamps will prevent any overheating. Just to be safe, I'm not going to throttle it up completely. We are going to put it at 90% and launching in 3, 2, 1, go. We need more throttle. Full throttle on this. All the boosters are firing except the central one. This is going to wait until the outer stages have dropped, and because the central 4 booster stack will have an even amount of fuel and they will burn out at the same time. Oh shit. Something has happened. This is not going well. Unfortunately, this has not gone well, but fortunately, look, our command pod has survived, and as long as no debris is going to land on top of it, its parachute should see the crew to safety. This means that our space program can continue at its 0 casualty level, but looking at this rocket, it might not do so for very long. Something went terribly, terribly wrong here. Let's have a look at the flight report. What happened? 15 seconds in, 2 fuel tanks broke apart, and then they smashed into the nuclear engines, and then everything went to shit. So we're going to be trying this again, but with a lower throttle level. If that doesn't work, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and add some struts. In the meantime, our mission is twofold here: see if a lower throttle works, and if not, where does the break occur. So I'm going to be launching now, lower throttle. Again, no fucking launch clamps. They are messed up again from the previous one. I have to remember to loosen the launch clamps, because otherwise obviously it's not going anywhere. Right, so 80% and launch. So we are going up, which is fortunate. I'm thinking maybe this booster stack isn't even enough, because we are going up very slowly. We are overheating at some point, but nothing has broken apart yet. So there, this breaks. This needs more struts. Ooh. That is very close to killing all our astronauts. They're still not out of the woods completely. They're falling perilously close to all the debris. I'm going to deploy the chute, and hopefully that will pull them up. I'm sure they appreciate testing basic rocket design principles, as does the ground crew here, I'm sure, by being strapped to the rocket. Still though, 0 casualties. And we are now going to move to the vehicle assembly building and adding some struts. What broke apart here is this one came apart from the central one. As you can see, I added quite a few struts already, but obviously we are going to need more. This is a fairly standard Kerbal Space Program adagium: if nothing works, add more struts. So this is exactly what I'm doing. Add some struts between the tanks as well, so hopefully they can cope with the massive stresses involved in rocketry. Reckon that should be enough struts. And we're going to put the launch clamps in the first stage as well to forever deal with that problem. And back to the launch pad and see how it goes this time around. Right, Franklin, Johnson and Durfrot up for their third go at flying this beast into orbit. I'm going to go for full throttle again, because hey, we reinforced it pretty handily. Here we go. So far so good, so far so good. The solid boosters are doing their thing, the rocket looks steady, no wobbling, a tiny bit of rotation. We have some overheating on 3 of the engines. Oh shit, there is some definite wobbling. We have to throttle down. Oh no 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 no. What is that? You might think the guy survived again, but this time they are very lucky to even be alive now, because a rocket sheared off their parachute. They did not hit the capsule, but they definitely did hit the parachutes. So I'm afraid they're all gonna die. Franklin though lives. No, he dies. He jumped out of the capsule, bounced on the ground in a mysterious display of physics, and then died. So that's the first 3 casualties. 13 seconds in. That is peculiar. That is definitely peculiar. It tells me the nuclear rocket detached. It wasn't even on. And then the jumbo tank detached from the jumbo tank. These are the 2 orange ones. We're going to put more struts. We are going to put more struts, and by doing so, let's imagine that each strut is a memoir, a remembrance for lost Kerbals. So we have a lot here, we have a lot here. It's still this, and we need to throttle down as well. Just too much throttle will break the rocket. At least until these side boosters are gone. 2 more struts, well actually 6 more struts, because I'm placing them 3 at a time. And we're going to go with 100% thrust until 10 seconds, because all the problems happen at 13 or 15 seconds, and then I'm going to reduce to around 80. Going to Duna is not without risks. We have Edorf, Gerfurt and Matting, the brand new crew. We're not telling them anyone has ever died. This is completely, utterly safe. Here we go. So 10 seconds. 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Okay, overheat starting. Throttling down a bit. Throttle down a bit. There we go. 80%. Stop that overheat. Overheat stopped. 16, 17. Everything looking just peachy. 100 meters a second. Just getting a slight wobble. Keep the rocket straight. Keep the rocket straight. Overheat. Throttling back. Oh, damn it. And everything went to shit again. The crew that... Oh! I was gonna say the crew is going to survive, but there is a rogue missile hell-bent on hitting them. I'm going to deploy the parachute and hopefully that will save them. So far only 3 casualties in this space program. And 2 moons have been visited. So that is something. I hope no one lives down here. They are all safely sequestered away in their bunkers, but it did not go well. These are the 2 landers, I think, or at least their command pods. They are not going to go for a soft landing, and everything crashing onto the floor again. So, once more back to the design stage. What I'm seeing is that this rocket is wobbling after it gets a little bit up in the air, so it has to remain straight up, otherwise it will fall apart. Here in this bit, this is a weak joint. This might be the culprit. There is one strut here attached to this nuclear engine. That is of course a horrible design flaw, which will mean that this engine would have to support all the thrust from the booster stack, and of course an engine is not made for that. Where is this strut? Where is the other part of this strut? Is this it? That was not it. Where is it? Is it this one here? This is a tiny flaw in the game. It is terribly hard to hunt down struts like this. Anyway, I'm going to delete the engines and replace the engines. That should get rid of any stray boosters. If it will even let me place them now. Damn it. Maybe it will let me place them one by one. One works. 2, no, that's not on there. 2 work. I just have to be a little bit careful. 3 work. And the game is having trouble deciding where I'm pointing. So let's see if the staging is still working out. Definitely not. First we have this, then we have that. That makes sense. And this is this bit, and our 4 engines have to fire along with that one. It still almost makes sense. So here we go, and now we are going to attach some struts to the tanks above the engines here. That should do a whole lot better. This is a problem with going from 3-way symmetry to 4-way symmetry, I can see. Fortunately, these struts don't weigh a whole lot and they won't be enough to unbalance the rocket as a whole. But this is a problem. I have 3-way symmetry on my booster stack and I have 4-way symmetry on my interplanetary stage, which means the struts don't line up. I'm going to solve this by making more of them. But I reckon this is where it went wrong, and the struts were ending up connecting to the actual engine bell, which of course is not a great idea. So I'm gonna have a look how this one goes. 3 casualties, 3 flags, 1 on the home planet, true, but we visited 2 moons and we are on our way to Duna, or as we might call it in the real world, Mars. You can see it's not quite easy to build a big rocket. Well, it's really easy actually, but you just have to make it properly. So, Edorf, Gerfurt and Matting, their 4th outing. No, their 2nd outing. the other guys died. So here we go. Full throttle until 10 seconds and then throttling back. That's the flight plan. 5 seconds. 6, 7, 8. Overheat is starting according to plan. This is a planned overheat and throttling back to stop this overheat. These are probably the inner engines here that are overheating, cannot dump their heat because there is a big engine next to them as well. 20 seconds, this might have been the furthest we have gone without horribly crashing. Trying to keep the rocket pointing up. Overheat is at a steady 60-70%. This is not a cause of concern. We are running out of booster, which is alright. They will be jettisoned with the liquid stacks, the outer ones. And as soon as they run out, they will run out almost simultaneously. We're at 4 kilometers now, it's going better than ever. Trying to stop this rotation that's going on. We have lost the solid boosters, they have run out, and the outer stacks are running out now. Jettisoning them and throttling up, because we will need the additional rocket power. We are now on our main booster stack. The remains are dropping back to Kerbin. We are hurting for speed. We're at 8 kilometers and at 180 meters per second. These boosters are going to have to do it. If they won't put us in orbit or at least well into space, this rocket needs to go back to the drawing board. Of course, as always in Kerbal Space Program, the mathematicians were busy, have not involved themselves at all with this missile, and the amount of fuel is basically just what was laying around. We are at 2 Gs now, backing on the speed, 300 meters per second, 15 kilometers. This is looking better and better, but the fuel is running out quickly. Pitching over slightly to get some sideways speed going. Remember, we have to go to 2.5 kilometers per second horizontal velocity. Up to 3 Gs now. We're going to have to throttle back a little bit lest we tear ourselves apart in the atmosphere. At 40% fuel is my estimation from this gauge. And we are doing well for altitude. We're at 25 kilometers up. This rocket is performing well. It's not tearing itself apart as it used to. And we're now at a 45-degree angle heading up into space. I can tell you already that this booster stack will not have enough fuel to... Oh, what's going on? What's going on? It's pitching over horribly. We are at 1,000 meters per second now, at 40 kilometers, going to complete the pitch over maneuver. But this stack probably will not have enough fuel to put us into a stable orbit. If it does, I will be very, very surprised. How are we going to fix this? We can, of course, try and use the interplanetary stage to establish orbit. Once we are in space, the nuclear engines will work, but obviously it's going to use up fuel that was intended for the interplanetary transfer. And with that, our booster stack runs out. And if we look at the map, we are going to make it until 94 kilometers in altitude, which is not very high. We are going to do the planned maneuver, the maneuver node, and to establish orbit we are going to need another 1,134 meters per second of delta V. Jettisoning the booster stack now and firing the nuclear engines. Nuclear engines are amazing. In short, they are so fuel efficient. What a regular rocket engine is, it is burning rocket fuel and an oxidizer, say liquid hydrogen or kerosene even, with liquid oxygen. This of course makes a massive fireball, which is the rocket plumes you are so used to. The Saturn rockets that landed humans on the moon used it, rockets today use it, and the rocket we just used to get into space used it. A nuclear rocket is a different concept altogether. It is basically a reactor core like you have in a power plant, which generates a lot of heat using uranium, plutonium, or what have you. This heat is then utilized by a gas or a liquid or anyway a reaction mass. In this case it's hydrogen. In the theoretical applications in the real world it was also hydrogen. Hydrogen is fed through the reactor core, it flashes to vapor in a high pressure, high temperature environment and is ejected through the rocket nozzle. So no combustion is occurring, it is just a gas being heated by a nuclear reactor. This means, because it's being heated by a nuclear reactor, the energy comes from the fission of atoms instead of from the combustion, that a lot more energy is used. It's given to the mass, the reaction mass, say hydrogen, is not as important as it is in rocket fuel. The energy is coming from the nuclear reaction, not from a fuel combustion. A lot more of energy is available this way, which means that the specific impulse of the reaction mass, which is the fuel, confusingly enough in a nuclear reactor, is really, really high, because most of the energy is not coming from the fuel itself. In fact, none of the energy is coming from the fuel itself. It is all coming from the nuclear reactor. That said, the thrust that you get from this is still a lot lower than you get from a traditional chemical massive engine. These big combustion reactions, they are unrivaled for delivering a lot of power in a short amount of time. They just do so very inefficiently. They use millions of gallons of hydrogen and oxygen, they burn it all at once, and the massive release of energy is what can throw a rocket upwards. The nuclear engines, they are very efficient, they deliver a lot of energy, but not that much thrust. As you can see, we have 4 engines here and we're still barely accelerating. In fact, we are already falling back to the planet. So I'm going to angle the ship up a bit, and if you have noticed, if you have looked at our fuel reserves, they are hardly being used. Our regular engines would have burnt out ages ago, but would have put us into an orbit as well. This is just taking a lot longer, is a lot more efficient, but as long as we're falling, that's not what we need. We are needing a big burst of energy. This is not something we have available. So it is going to be near, because we have almost reached orbital speed, but we are past our highest point. We are falling back to Kerbin, so we are going to have to fight gravity again, something which these rockets are notoriously bad at, because they deliver a low amount of power. So I'm angling up 45 degrees now. We have to stay out of the atmosphere, because another thing, if the atmosphere gets into these rockets, they will overheat, explode, and not provide any thrust at all. So we have to use these into space. We have to stop falling down, which I don't actually think these rockets have enough thrust to keep us from doing, but we need to have that sideways speed as well to get into orbit. This is a problem. We are almost there. Look, there's our flag. We are almost there. We need about 500 more meters per second, but we have re-entered the atmosphere. This is a dire sign indeed. Our fuel tanks here, our first spare fuel tanks that were to be used in the interplanetary leg of our journey, are almost empty. I will jettison them in a bit to check whether that system works. In the meantime, we are going almost fast enough to be in orbit, but ironically we are falling back to the surface. This is how you botch your trajectory, by the way. We are going very fast, but going in the wrong direction and in the atmosphere, and in just a few moments more we will start to be slowed down so much by the atmosphere that our rockets will be doing nothing. Right, so these can go away. They're getting shot away by tiny rockets. That worked great, but even without this mass, I foresee nothing but trouble, because these rockets become less and less effective when we're in the atmosphere. So we're not actually losing thrust, but we're using more fuel, which is unrealistic. In reality, they would lose thrust and use the same amount of fuel, but this is the way the game computes it, and we are already have returned to an altitude of 37 kilometers, a decidedly unspace-worthy altitude. We are at 1760 meters per second, which is almost fast enough, but we are not going to be able to get out of the atmosphere again. Now the aerodynamic drag is wreaking havoc on my ship. I can barely control it anymore. I'm going to lose these landers, so they can burn up by themselves. I'm going to cut the engines. Oh shit, don't hit that. And we are re-entering Kerbin. So I don't have to tell you, the plan did not work. We need a bigger booster stage, and that's the same story as always. We need a bigger booster stage, and considering the problems we already had with this booster, I foresee nothing but trouble with that. Fortunately, we have designed the rocket to be re-entry safe, so our intrepid crew will be able to survive. They're deploying their parachute now, so they have some distance between themselves and the radioactive missile that was to carry them to Duna, but of course isn't. It isn't. Time warping now at 4 times speed to get over with this descent, and unfortunately we have naught. Oh shit. The time warp. At a high rate of time warp, parachutes are liable to snap off, killing the crew. That's good to know. We'll pretend it was the nuclear reactor in close proximity, radiating them to death. So there are 6 casualties now. We are no further in our flag planting missions, and I'm going to bed. So better luck next time. See you later. Good night.